They say one of their achievements for the year is bringing peace to Syria. And the whole world's talking about it. It's the level of stupidity is incredible. I'm telling you, I used to use the word incompetent. Now I just call them stupid. I went to an Ivy League school. I'm very highly educated. I know words. I have the best words. But there's no better word than stupid. Right? There is none. There is none.
The man who boasted during the campaign that he used the best words, today trying to contain an international uproar by saying he used the word would instead of wouldn't. And if he's reading the press about that Putin summit, he's becoming more familiar with the word appeasement. It wasn't that long ago when he used it himself. He said South Korea's, quote, talk of appeasement with North Korea will not work. Now the word's being used to describe Trump's decision to side with the Russian president against his own intelligence agencies. Now, perhaps it's reasonable to suggest that an American president who endorsed the position of a hostile leader to his face has engaged in something worse than appeasement. To talk more about the president's conciliatory action toward Russia, I'm joined by Robin Wright, contributing writer to The New Yorker, who has a piece up now called Trump's Appeasement Summit with Putin, and Jason Johnson, MSNBC political analyst and politics professor at Morgan State University. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here. Robin, it's interesting because you write in your piece about Kennedy and Khrushchev meeting and how that was doubted by people. Every president who meets an adversary is always questioned and wondered about. But in that particular case, it probably weakened America's position and contributed to greater tension. But there was a nationally agreed upon goal and aim to having that meeting, which is not the same thing that can be said of the meeting with Vladimir Putin.
Well, there actually were similarities in that President Kennedy thought he could charm Premier Khrushchev, and he didn't go in with a really hard agenda. And I think President Trump did somewhat of the same this time. He thought he could develop a relationship, and that would be the basis for concrete actions. I think one of the problems is the president came out with very few deliverables, and in the meantime, complimented one of America's greatest adversaries. And it comes in context not just of the past couple of days, but of 2 profound months in which the president has alienated the 7 most powerful economies at the G7 meeting in Canada, insulted the prime minister of our neighboring state. He went to I have a meeting with the North Korean leader and got very little that was tangible, an agreement in principle, but no specifics. And of course, the North Koreans have not been very cooperative ever since. Then he turned around and had a confrontation with Germany at the NATO summit, demanded that all our allies double what they're contributing. He talked about the European Union on Sunday as a foe. He violated protocol with the Queen. He insulted the British Prime Minister. And you have to wonder where that leaves the United States in terms of our image, our ability to rely on allies. This is a very precarious moment for this country.
It is very unclear how we are better and stronger. But one of the key differences between all of the times that American leaders, American presidents met with adversarial leaders, Jason, in the 20th century and into the 21st, the one thing that they don't share with Donald Trump is none of them were accused of having some relationship with the adversarial power, one that might have enriched them politically or personally. There is this cloud that hangs over Donald Trump, which makes a lack of success at a summit like this even more meaningful.
Well, yes, Ali. Look, this is not a cloud. It's a rainstorm. It is a flood of problems and questions that surrounded this meeting. One of the reasons that people have concerns, and I have concerns as a political scientist, is you always want the president to have an agenda. In general, it is a good idea for the 2 most nuclear powerful nations on the country, for their leaders to have rapprochement, for them to have conversations. But when you don't know what the president's agenda is, and when he doesn't make that clear and there's no recording of the meeting, it becomes dangerous. And the fact that this president has consistently refused to acknowledge that everything in his national security apparatus has said, look, this is a nation that has attempted to engage in cyber warfare. It could have had an impact on your election. It could have an impact on the 2018 elections, and says nothing about it. That makes his lack of preparation going into the meeting all the more dangerous.
So, Robin, if you're going to empathize and you're going to say, look, Donald Trump hears Russian interference in the election as delegitimizing his his election. But putting that aside, he openly didn't prepare for this meeting. We are now hearing this Washington Post reporting that they at the last minute put together a 100-page document, the most important stuff. Didn't read that. He didn't take his advisor's advice. He bragged about how this was a really easy meeting. He said he's been preparing this for this all his life. It's not even like he was looking for success.
Yes, and when you think about what he did over the weekend, playing 2 rounds of golf at his resorts in Scotland, it's very worrisome that the president actually didn't do basic homework on the fundamental issues facing the United States, on the basic issues that divide the United States and Russia, and it was just shocking the lack of substance that came out of this epic historic meeting. References to possible arms control, but nothing tangible. And we have the Russians are in violation of the INF agreement. The START agreement expires in the not too distant future, which is limiting nuclear arms. It leaves a pit in my stomach when I think about what could have been accomplished at this summit, how it could have been historic, and how it failed at almost every level. And
but
it
as you
actually
pointed
left.
out, so did NATO, so did the South Korean meetings, so did G7. But Jason, I mean, you look, there's rapprochement or accommodation, if you will. There's appeasement, and then there's something that some people are saying is worse, because we don't really know what the motivation was. So there actually could have been some tangible gain for an adversary who's been attacking our election systems without any gain for America out of this.
Right. There's rapprochement, there's appeasement, and then there's just selling out. And that's essentially what we saw on Monday. There was an opportunity here for things to be accomplished. And again, the concern that I have is not just that the president has clearly wanted to alienate allies, but the fact that our allies can no longer even trust the information exchange that has become the bedrock of American security over the last 70 years, because they know that Trump is going to go run to his BFF in Russia and share all that information. That's part of what makes this so dangerous. But I also think this going forward, there was one nominally positive thing that came out of Korea. There's new peace deals, discussion between North and South Korea. There is nothing positive to come out of meetings with Russia. There was nothing from START. There was no discussion of Georgia. There was no discussion of Chechnya. There was no discussion of the Ukraine, no discussion of Putin's support for right-wing white nationalist organizations all throughout Europe. None of that was discussed, at least as far as what the president tells us. So at this point, for all we know, they established a way to have some private communication that we'll never know anything about, because the president refused to share what was actually accomplished in the meeting.
Robin Wright, Jason Johnson, thanks to both of you for joining us this evening.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.